A 13-year-old boy was brutally unalived by three of his fellow classmates, prompting to internet outrage over the brutal methods. They buried the boy in an abandoned greenhouse. Then they went to school and played video games as usual, and now they've been arrested for the crime. However, the family of the victim did an in-depth digging test to find out that there was no way that the three boys could have done this themselves within a few hours. So who exactly helped them and why? Let's talk about this case. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. Another mystery has struck China, and this time, the murder incident was just the beginning because this story has reached what's called many internet users are calling deep water zone, meaning there's too many questions, not enough answers as to how three 13-year-old boys could do this to one of their fellow classmates, remain so level-headed about it through the entire process, and then went on throughout their day before they were discovered. And then there's also the situation with how these boys are called left behind students in that their parents, because they're in the rural parts of the town, would go out of town to look for work, leaving parental education behind, and they're often living with their family or relatives or grandparents. Many people were confused how the three criminals could act and did what they did, go home, pretend like nothing happened. One of them continued to play video games while the other one went to school as normal, and then until they were discovered were remaining so calm and wasn't really showing any signs that they had just committed this crime. They were even so calm that they were able to transfer money from the victim's phone afterwards and then continue on. It didn't seem like they were bothered by the fact that they had just unalived somebody. It was like as if they just killed a chicken instead of a person. Many people were saying how these three criminals were more cold-blooded, more professional than trained killers. Let's first talk about the latest updates. According to this image that's been circulating across the Chinese internet, I'm not going to put the image in the actual video, the unblurred version, but I'll leave the link in the description so you can check it out. Now, the warning here is that it's a triggering image, so that viewers' discretion is advised for clicking on the link. But basically what it is, again, the link will be in the description. It's a computer-generated version of a render of what happens to a face that's been fractured. And this particular picture is not actually related to the story that we're talking about, but it's contributing to the fact because the actual details, according to the father who attended the dissection procedure of his son, that the damage and the injuries sustained to the face and other parts of the body is much worse than what this picture is presenting. Now, this was all allegedly done by three boys, 13-year-olds, with shovels. Now, of course, official media, once again, like I said, it's not the image directly related to the case. They come out with reporters saying how this picture is not real. But the idea here is that based on the information provided by the family, the father, the real situation is much worse than what the image is able to portray. In the interview, the father says that he clenched his teeth as they conducted dissection and that they're waiting for the autopsy report, and he looked just absolutely devastated. Now, in pictures, he wasn't able to say this, but in descriptive words, he says that he vowed to take revenge for his son. So obviously, if he actually does try to do something, he's going to be landed on a no travel ban list or some sort of a watch list just in case he decides to take the petition to Beijing to try to seek justice or any other forms of, whether that's taking revenge or whatnot, but he's likely going to be under surveillance. Now, what exactly happened with this particular case? Well, first, the 13-year-old victim had told his family on March 10th, which was a Sunday at 1 p.m. local time, that he was going out to play with his friends. Now, the victim, like I said, he's a left-behind child, so he lives with his grandparents. His parents are divorced. His dad, who works out of town, was away at the time. And so he told his parents that, of course, this is how typically bullying would take place in schools in China. If you have an incomplete family, you're divorced, or your family situation is not right, you're bullied for that, right? And because I understand this, even though when I was in school, it wasn't this bad, but I understand how this could be a point because you don't want to tell your grandparents who are much older that you're getting bullied at school, and you don't have a dad at home who you're able to kind of talk to about the situation. So it's likely that he continued to get bullied and he never really was able to kind of tell anybody about it. Now, on the day, he told his family that he was going out to play with his classmates at 1 p.m. And about 4 hours later, his family had called his cell phone asking where he was, and he said, well, he will be back soon. And then the next time they tried to call him, his phone was turned off. And so people got worried in the family. They went out and started searching for him around the town. His family started to ask around the classmates he allegedly went to go play with, and they said they hadn't seen him yet. And then so they went to different households to knock on their doors. And it wasn't until later, this was much, I believe the next day now, that they went to the police station and they watched surveillance footage of just those surveillance cameras around town, that they found that he was at some point crossed with the one of the three criminals. And that's when they determined that these people might be involved. So they tried to go question them. Now, here's the interesting part, right? The father who came back, of course, his family called the father to come back and help look for him, discovered the next day that when he was trying to recharge his son's phone number with more credits, that he logged onto his WeChat and he found that there was a money transfer made before his son's phone was shut off. And so that, of course, drew a lot of suspicion. And so then they went to investigate with the police. And initially, now the one of the three criminals wouldn't admit that they had done something. It wasn't until the two other ones confessed to their crimes that the third one said, yes, we did do this. And they gave up the location of where they buried the body. And it turns out that these three are actually fellow classmates of the boy, the victim. One of them is actually his desk partner. Isn't that crazy? What they did was they buried the body in an abandoned greenhouse that's very close to one of the criminals' family home. Of course, the three have been arrested and the boy's remains have been dug out. But internet users are particularly outraged at the following details. For example, it says that the three criminals used shovels to bash in the victim's face, breaking the bones in his face, and then it seemed like when he was buried, he was still alive because they had found dirt inside his lungs as well as his respiratory tract, meaning that he likely suffocated from being buried alive. And then the second detail is that one of the criminal allegedly went home after and played video games on his bed as if nothing happened, while another went to school to prepare for his next week's class as if nothing happened as well. And then there were also speculations that there was no way three boys could have done this themselves. It was likely that their family were also involved in the cover-up because there's just some of the details that I'm going to talk about that didn't make sense to people. The reason is that the parent and the family and relatives of the victim, they actually went to just one of the grounds and they showed a test video of them digging into the ground to see just how much time it would take for them to dig a hole deep enough and wide enough to bury the body. And in the video, it took adults they were having such a hard time to dig into the dirt in that particular area that it felt like there was no way that the entire process was done in a single day. So it was likely that they received help or that the hole was dug prior to them committing the crime. And then other people also showed video demonstration of them trying to dig into the ground. Now keep in mind, this is an adult and it took them a few hours to dig into the depth of 2 meters. And so they questioned how they could have done this themselves. And they also showed that here that their hands are red from using the shovel. So media report once again provided a detail that when the police and the family members went and knocked on one of the criminals' home door, it took them 2 hours for them to open up. It wasn't until that the police went and grabbed the local village chief to try to convince them to open the door that they actually did. And so finally, after back and forth, now the reason that they said they didn't want to open was because apparently the investigation could have caused harm to their kid's mental state. Now, the funny thing is, right, if you're truly innocent, you would be shocked to hear that one of your fellow villager was, is dead and their family's looking for answers. If it was an innocent person, they would actively cooperate by, telling the police what they saw or what they witnessed or what they know or what they didn't know, right? But this family was very much trying to hide the fact that one of their son, or maybe their son or their grandson in this case, was involved in this crime. So just based on these details, it felt like it was so against common sense. It was abnormal in the ways that these people reacted that they felt like the case was much more complicated than just 3 13-year-olds, what they could achieve in a single day. Now, according to the latest, I guess you would say police information providing the updated details, the crime was pre-planned. And the fact was the day prior, they had dug parts of the hole ready and then continued to dig after the victim was murdered. However, the police refuted the information suggesting that the hole was 2 meters deep. They say it was only about 56 centimeters deep. And reporters actually went to the original site to try to find the hole, but it was already covered up. It was filled already. So of course, like typical fashion on Chinese social media, the CCP has censored most of the information available, and they're trying to drive a narrative, basically trying to downplay and minimize the exposure of this particular event to across the country in hoping that this event would die down. And it's very likely that the victim's family will receive some type of compensation, but it's not going to be enough. And so if they try to go and petition to seek for justice in Beijing or somewhere, they're likely to be blocked and they will actually be punished for attempting to do that to seek justice for their son. Like I said, it's very likely that the school bullying prior to the actual murder has been going on for a very long time. The aunt had provided some details, such as that he wouldn't go to school unless he was given pocket money like 5, 8, or 10 yuan, and he would be happy after he got the money. Now the family thought that he was just going out and buying snacks and delicious foods, according to the aunt, but so they were never really asking him why he needed the money. And it's very typical for kids to get pocket change, so it's not like that was out of the ordinary. And it seems like he was lured into the greenhouse afterwards, after he had crossed with the 13-year-old criminals. There, he was murdered, and it was then that they transferred money from his phone to their own accounts. Now, prior to the police allowing the dad to get into the room during the autopsy and dissection, the dad had live streamed, and the lawyer in the live streams had said that it's been a while since the police allowed them to see his son. And then the aunt, who was just providing the detail, also did a live stream where she basically said that the local police department had been pushing back the autopsy for a very long time. Similarly, around the same time, multiple other cases of bullying and videos have circulated on Chinese social media. And so this is becoming an increasing apparent situation around China. School bullying seems to have turned extremely violent. In some cases, a 16-year-old, just a day after, had been beaten to death by fellow 16-year-old classmates as well. And the talk of the day is really how the three criminals will be punished. Now, if you're a minor, you will not face capital punishment in China according to their criminal law. But there are particular cases where you will receive heavy sentence and punishment based on the crime that you committed. Now, these are 13-year-olds, and so they meet the criteria, which is basically they will be punished if they cause things like death and other severe damage. But the problem right now is the internet users in China, they're discussing the idea that should you let numbers, the age, of course, be the factor that deters you from seeking capital punishment just because they're minors. But what about the severity of the crimes, right? Because many people are discussing this idea that what right did the three people have to decide the fate of one, but in turn, millions of people cannot even decide the fate of the three, knowing the objective facts around this case. And that just simply because they're minors, they should not seek the same level of punishment as adults, even though the things that they did were consistently of that with the level that the adults would do, if not worse in this case. And the story really turned into an emotional sort of response because people were saying that every bully across the country is looking at how this case will be handled to determine how severe they will be punished if they went this extreme, such as murdering the person that they're bullying. If they don't receive capital punishment, the 13-year-olds, that is in this case, does that reflect on that anybody else who does this extreme stuff would also not face capital punishment, which means that they can actually murder somebody and get away with it, right? They won't face the same capital punishment as adults would in China. Of course, there is the death sentence in China, but it's just because they're minors. So could they get away with all that? In my view, what really created the situation in the first place, we know that the objective fact is that these are left behind children. Their parents are forced to find jobs elsewhere because there's simply nothing in the towns that they live in for them to survive and given the family situation. So you've already created this vacuum in where parental education, this parental love, this idea doesn't really exist among this group of kids. And who really created that situation? Well, it's the division in society where if you live in the rural area of the country, instead of receiving the same level of education quality that you would get in the city, which in many other countries you end up with a subpar relationship with your surrounding areas, with the students, as well as just in general a lack of growth. And in China, it's already in a hyper-materialistic state in which for you to get ahead, your parents teaches you to use any ways or any means possible, necessary, right? Whether that means you have to kill someone, you deceive, you lie, you try to get ahead of other people. In whatever way, it's for your personal benefit that you get ahead in society, that you succeed. And this has become a very apparent phenomenon. Now, when it comes to school bullying, obviously China's not the only country that has school bullying, but to go that far, this is unheard of, right? And there's so much social resentment. Just today, while we're filming this episode, there's a piece of news about a car in Beijing that drove into a crowd. And we've been basically covering so many of these tragedies since the Chinese New Year began, and it's becoming increasingly more frequent, as I always say. And it's a clear reflection of the state of society under the CCP. And over the years that it has been in power, we've only seen tragedies. And in the bottom level, so to speak, right, whether that's the rural area or even in cities, you see there's a huge retaliation against society, but not against the government itself. They're just going against innocent people. Kids in school also don't focus on interpersonal skills and developing their virtues and developing their benevolence. They focus on how to get ahead using test exams, and they're basically like robots. So the ultimate source of blame is on the government under the CCP. All right, that's today for the tragedy that we're discussing of three 13-year-olds murdering a fellow 13-year-old schoolmate. And if you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye bye.